What does it feel like to be told you're not good enough? For Amelia Hayes, it was a public humiliation. Her boyfriend of 5 years, Mark Riley, dumped her in the middle of a crowded restaurant for Chloe, a woman he called an upgrade. He said Amelia was a dead end, a hobbyist, a nobody who spent her life covered in dust and string. He thought he was trading up, securing his future by attaching himself to a woman with social connections and a polished veneer. He had no idea that the woman he'd just discarded was 3 months away from becoming one of the most powerful people in his world. He thought the story was over. It was just beginning. The smell of dust, old paper, and weak tea clung to Amelia Hayes like a second skin. Her world was one of meticulous, quiet patience. Bent over a large, brightly lit table in the small back room of the New York Antiquities Annex, she was performing microsurgery on a 19th century French lace shawl. Her fingers, though smudged with archival adhesive, moved with the grace of a concert pianist. To an outsider, she was a mousy woman in a grey cardigan, lost in a forgotten craft. To the few who understood, she was a magician. She didn't just fix old textiles, she resurrected them. She read the stories woven into their threads and carefully, painstakingly, rewove the parts that time had stolen. Her phone buzzed on the table, the vibration rattling a jar of specialized needles. She sighed, her concentration breaking. It was Mark. Again. "Running late. Client dinner. Don't wait up." Amelia looked at the clock. 6:30 p.m. Their date night. It was the third one he'd cancelled this month. A familiar, cold knot tightened in her stomach. Mark Riley had been the center of her life for 5 years, ever since they'd met in college. He was ambitious, handsome, and worked as an associate at Barrington Capital, a mid-tier finance firm where he desperately wanted to be a shark. Lately, however, his ambition had curdled into something else. It had become a mirror that reflected all of her perceived flaws. She packed up her tools, her shoulders aching. She loved this work. It was her passion, her calling. But Mark called it her little hobby. "Amelia, are you ever going to get a real job?" he'd asked just last week, gesturing around their small, rent-controlled apartment. This string saving, it's cute, but it doesn't pay for a table at per se. It doesn't get us into the Hamptons. I'm out there every day building an empire, and you're darning socks for dead people. It wasn't sock darning. She was preserving priceless artifacts. But to Mark, if it didn't have a stock ticker or a logo, it was worthless. She walked home through the damp November evening. Their apartment, once a cozy refuge, now felt like a holding cell. When Mark finally came home just before midnight, he didn't smell of a client dinner. He smelled of expensive perfume, a sharp, floral scent she didn't recognize. And he wasn't alone. "Amelia?" "You're up," he said, flicking on the light. He wasn't apologetic. He was annoyed. Standing just behind him, wrapped in a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than Amelia's last 6 paychecks, was a woman. She was tall, blonde, and had the bored, perfect face of a high-fashion model. She was a Chloe. In fact, that was her name, Chloe Vanderbilt. "Mark, darling, you didn't say you had a roommate," a high, clear voice drawled. Chloe looked Amelia up and down, her gaze lingering on Amelia's paint-smudged sweatpants and frayed wool sweater. Her lip curled in a tiny, perfect sneer. "Amelia, this is Chloe," Mark said, his voice flat. He wouldn't meet Amelia's eyes. "Chloe, this is Amelia, my old girlfriend." The word old hung in the air, sharp and heavy as an axe. "Oh," Amelia whispered. The room was spinning. The cold knot in her stomach turned to ice. "Mark? What's going on?" "What's going on?" Mark said, stepping fully into the apartment and dropping his keys into the bowl by the door, is that I'm moving on. I'm moving up. Amelia, look at us. Look at this. He waved a hand at their worn-out sofa, at her loom in the corner. This isn't a life. It's a rut. I need more. I need a better woman. Someone who understands my world. Someone who can be a partner, not a project. A better woman. The words were methodical, cruel. Chloe smiled, a small, triumphant smirk. "Mark, don't be mean," she said, though her eyes were alight with victory. She ran a manicured hand down his arm. "It's not her fault, she's quaint." Amelia felt her face flush, a hot, painful wave of shame. She looked at Mark, the man she had supported, the man she had loved, the man whose student loan payments she had helped cover for 2 years by taking on extra restoration work. He looked back at her, his expression cold, bored, and slightly inconvenienced. He was a stranger. You're leaving?" Amelia managed to say, her voice cracking. "I'm already gone," Mark said. He walked past her into the bedroom. She heard him pulling a pre-packed suitcase from the closet. He had planned this. The client dinner was a lie to get her out of the way, but she'd come home too early. He hadn't even had the decency to do this privately. He'd brought her here to rub Amelia's nose in her own inadequacy. "You have until the end of the month to get your things out," Mark said, wheeling the suitcase into the living room. "My name is the only one on the lease, so it's cleaner this way." "Where am I supposed to go?" Amelia asked, the desperation rising in her throat. Mark shrugged. "I don't know. Call one of your museum friends. Maybe you can sleep in a sarcophagus." Chloe let out a sharp little laugh. Mark paused at the door, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive shirt. "It's just business, Amelia. You're a low-yield asset. I'm reallocating my portfolio. You understand." He and Chloe walked out. The door clicked shut, the deadbolt sliding home with a sound of utter finality. Amelia stood in the center of the room, her hands hanging numbly at her sides. She could still smell Chloe's perfume, a toxic cloud that was choking the air. She looked at her loom, at the intricate threads she had spent her life learning to weave. It had all been for nothing. Mark was right. She was a hobbyist, a project, a nobody. She sank onto the worn sofa, and, for the first time in her adult life, she completely, utterly, fell apart. The first week was a blur of grey. Amelia moved in a fog of disbelief and humiliation. The apartment, now silent, felt cavernous and hostile. Every object was a memory. A tiny betrayal. The coffee mug he used every morning. The framed photo of them hiking upstate. A photo from a time when he still looked at her with warmth. She packed her life into cardboard boxes, her movements slow and robotic. She had found a tiny sublet studio in Brooklyn, a garden-level apartment that was really just a glorified basement. It was all she could afford. The day of the move, she was hauling a heavy box labeled research texts when her phone rang. It was Mark. Her heart gave a stupid, painful leap before she crushed it. "What do you want, Mark?" she answered, her voice hoarse. "Just making sure you're on schedule. The new furniture is being delivered at 4, and Chloe is particular. She doesn't want any of your old stuff touching the new things." "My stuff is almost gone," Amelia said, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. Good, he said dismissively. "Listen, I'm sorry it was so abrupt, but it was for the best. You'll see. You were holding me back, Amelia, and I was holding you back. Now you're free to, go all in on your little thread museum, or whatever. It's called textile conservation, Mark, and it's a profession." Right, he said, his disinterest palpable. "Look, I have to run. Chloe's taking me to the club. Just have a good life, Amelia. No hard feelings." The line clicked dead. No hard feelings. He had detonated her life and walked away without a scratch, and he expected no hard feelings. The anger, cold and sharp, finally cut through the fog of her grief. It wasn't enough to make her feel better, but it was enough to make her move faster. She finished the move in a miserable, drizzling rain. Her new apartment was damp, and the single window looked out onto a brick wall. That night, she sat on her mattress on the floor, eating takeout from a styrofoam container. She had no job. The Antiquities Annex had just lost its funding and had to let her go 2 days before the breakup. She had no home. She had no partner. She was 29 years old and a complete and total failure. She pulled out her laptop, desperation making her fingers fly. She applied for everything. Museum curator, overqualified. Art handler, underqualified. Receptionist at a dentist's office. Barista, anything. Weeks turned into a month. The rejections piled up. Her small savings account was hemorrhaging money. She was down to her last $1,000. Mark, meanwhile, was all over social media. Chloe's Instagram was a glittering montage of their new life, sipping champagne at the Polo Bar, front row at a fashion show, a surprise weekend trip to St. Bart's. Mark was tagged in every photo, his smile wide and predatorily bright. He looked polished. Chloe had already replaced his old comfortable clothes with sleek, expensive suits. He was a new man. A better man. Amelia was on the verge of giving up, of packing her bags and moving back to her parents' house in Ohio, a failure in every sense of the word. Then an email arrived. It was from an address she didn't recognize, a private domain, ggravesathornenterprises.com. "Dear Miss Hayes, your name was provided to us by Dr. Alistair Finch of the Courtauld Institute in London. He referred to you as the only person in North America he would trust with a piece of this importance. We represent a private collector who has acquired a significant and significantly damaged 17th century Burgundian tapestry. The piece is of immense historical value, and its restoration requires the utmost skill and discretion. The commission is substantial. We require a non-disclosure agreement to be signed before we can proceed. Please let us know if you are interested in receiving the portfolio. Sincerely, Gideon Graves, Office of the Principal Thorn Enterprises." Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. Thorn Enterprises. She knew that name. Everyone did. It was the semi-mythical holding company of Julian Thorn, a reclusive tech billionaire who had vanished from public life a decade ago. He was rumored to be eccentric, brilliant, and richer than God. And Dr. Finch, he was a legend in her field, a man whose books she had studied. He remembered her from a single guest lecture she'd given as a graduate student. She typed her reply with shaking hands. "I am very interested." The NDA arrived seconds later. It was ironclad. She signed it digitally. The portfolio downloaded. Amelia opened the first file. Her jaw dropped. It wasn't just a tapestry. It was the tapestry. The Lost Orpheus, a piece believed to have been destroyed during the French Revolution. It was a masterpiece, a swirl of mythological figures woven with silk and gold thread. And it was in terrible condition. It was water-damaged, torn and faded. It was the most challenging restoration project she had ever seen. It was, she realized, impossible, and she knew, with absolute certainty, exactly how to save it. A second email came from Mr. Graves. The client's offer is a $250,000 commission, plus all expenses for a secure, climate-controlled studio and any necessary materials. The timeline is 6 months. Amelia stared at the number. $250,000. It was more money than she had earned in the last 5 years combined. It was a lifeline. It was a miracle. She typed her reply. I accept. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. A black car, silent and imposing, picked Amelia up from her damp basement apartment. Mr. Graves, an older man with a face that was both severe and kind, met her. He didn't shake her hand. He simply nodded and presented her with a set of keys. This will be your workspace, Miss Hayes, he said, leading her into a massive, light-filled loft in a secure, unmarked building in Chelsea. It is climate-controlled, has north-facing light, and the security is absolute. The tapestry arrives tomorrow. The studio was a dream. It was equipped with state-of-the-art conservation tables, magnification lamps, and rows upon rows of archival storage. A check for $50,000, the initial materials advance, was already on the desk. Amelia was speechless. This is incredible. Mr. Thorne believes in providing his specialists with the correct tools, Graves said. You will report to me weekly. You will not speak of this project to anyone. Is that understood? Perfectly, Amelia said, her voice filled with a new, steely resolve. When the tapestry arrived, carried in a climate-controlled crate by white-gloved art handlers, Amelia wept. It was more magnificent, and more damaged than she had imagined. The tear wasn't a simple rip. It was a gaping wound that ran through the central figure of Orpheus. For the first month, Amelia didn't just work. She waged a war against time. She slept on a cot in the studio, her entire world shrinking to the microscopic level of individual fibers. She began by documenting every inch of the damage, taking thousands of photographs. Then, the cleaning. She used specialized, pH-balanced solvents, applied with tiny cotton swabs, to lift centuries of grime without disturbing the fragile, vegetable-dyed silks. She sent her first report to Mr. Graves, a 40-page document detailing her proposed treatment plan. She expected a simple, approved. Instead, her computer chimed with a video call request. It wasn't from Graves. The name on the screen was simply JT. She smoothed her hair, her heart pounding, and accepted the call. The face that appeared was not what she expected. Julian Thorne wasn't a slick, suit-wearing CEO. He looked to be in his late 40s, with an unruly mass of dark hair, intense blue eyes, and a 3-day-old stubble. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt and was sitting in what looked like a library. Ms. Hayes, he said. His voice was quiet, but resonant. I read your report. Mr. Thorne, it's an honor to meet you, sir. Please call me Julian. Sir is for men who enjoy shouting at people. He leaned closer to the camera. Your analysis of the dye migration in Section 4. You identified the cochineal over dye as a 19th century repair attempt, not part of the original 17th century palette. How? Amelia took a breath. This was her language. The microspectroscopy showed a different mordant. The original weavers would have used an alum mordant for that shade of crimson, but this patch used tin. They wouldn't have had tin mordanted cochineal in the 1680s. It's a hallmark of a later, Victorian-era repair. Julian stared at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Amelia worried she had been too technical, too Amelia. Then, a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It transformed him. You're not just a restorer, Mrs. Hayes, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. You're a historian. You're a chemist. You're the first person in a century to actually read this piece correctly. I just love the work, Mr. Thorne. Julian. I can see that, he said. The previous experts I hired wanted to chemically strip the piece. They would have destroyed it. You want to heal it." He paused. "My family owned a textile mill in England for generations. I grew up around looms. My grandmother taught me to weave before I learned to code. I bought this tapestry because it reminded me of her. It's the last piece of a world I thought was gone." For the next hour, they didn't talk about money or timelines. They talked about the specific symbolic meaning of a blue rose in Burgundian art. They talked about the lost art of gold thread weaving. For the first time in her life, Amelia felt like she was speaking to someone who spoke her native language. She wasn't a hobbyist. She was an expert. When the call ended, Amelia felt a new energy humming in her veins. It wasn't just the money. It was the respect. She began the most delicate phase, reweaving. She had sourced silk thread from a specialist breeder in Italy, custom dyeing it herself using historically accurate materials. Weld for the yellows, madder for the reds, wode for the blues. Her hands, steady and sure, began to stitch the wound closed. With every thread she passed through the ancient warp, she felt like she was stitching her own, tattered life back together. The calls with Julian became a regular occurrence. They started as weekly check-ins and soon became almost daily conversations. He was fascinated by her process, and she was astonished by his depth of knowledge. He wasn't just a patron, he was a scholar. "The tension on that reweave has to be perfect, Amelia," he advised during one call, as he watched her work via a high-resolution camera she had set up. "Too tight, and it will pucker over time. Too loose, and it will sag. You're not just matching the color, you're matching the memory of the original fiber." "I know," she murmured, her focus absolute. "I'm compensating for 300 years of gravitational stress." He laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "You're brilliant. Has anyone ever told you that?" Amelia paused, her needle hovering. "No," she said, the word coming out quieter than she intended. "Most people find this boring." "Most people are fools," Julian said, his voice hardening for a moment. "There's nothing more valuable than a master of a lost art. Passion, true passion. It's the rarest commodity in the world. Anyone can move money around on a screen. Marketers can sell junk, but to create, to preserve, that's different." Amelia's head snapped up. "What did you say?" Julian blinked, looking confused. "I said, to preserve is different?" "No, before that. You said, marketers." "Oh, yes. Marketers can sell junk. Why?" No, Amelia said, her heart rabbit-punching her chest. "You said Mark. You said my ex-boyfriend's name." Julian's face went completely still. The silence on the call stretched for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. "Amelia," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "I believe your NDA covers my research methods. When I consider a partnership of this magnitude, I am thorough. I do a full background check, not just on you, on your associations. You knew about Mark, about the breakup?" "I know," Julian said, his eyes intense, "that a man named Mark Riley, an associate at Barrington Capital, terminated a 5-year relationship with you, citing your lack of professional ambition. I know he is currently dating Chloe Vanderbilt, a woman whose family name is strong, but whose personal trust fund is leveraged to the hilt. I know he left you with less than 2 months' rent in your account. I know you deserved better." Amelia was stunned. Part of her felt violated, that this private humiliation was known to Julian Thorne. But another, stronger part felt defended. "You knew all that, and you still hired me." "Hired you?" Julian scoffed. Amelia, I didn't hire you despite that. I hired you because of this." He motioned to the tapestry on her table. "Your skill is everything. The fact that you possess that skill and have endured the arrogant dismissal of small-minded men. It doesn't make you a risk. It makes you a fortress. It told me you had the patience and the strength to see this through." He leaned forward. "This project, it's more than just one tapestry. This was a test. A test. I've been looking for someone to run a new venture for me. A foundation. The Thorne Institute for Textile Preservation. I have one of the world's largest private collections, and it's all sitting in a Swiss vault, unseen. I want to build an institute that not only preserves these works, but teaches these dying arts. I'm endowing it with $500 million. Amelia's breath caught. That's incredible, Julian. But it's just a pile of money without a visionary to run it. I needed someone who wasn't a stuffy academic, someone who wasn't a corporate drone. I needed a master. I needed you. This tapestry, this was your interview, and you, Ms. Hayes, have passed. You want me to run your foundation? I want you to be the CEO, he said simply. I want you to build your dream, on my dollar. Change the world. Show them what boring really looks like. Amelia looked down at her hands, stained with dye and history. The same hands Mark had ridiculed. A better woman. A project. She thought of Mark and Chloe, climbing their slippery social ladder. They were playing a game of snakes and ladders. Julian Thorne was offering her the whole board. "When do I start?" she asked. The next 6 months were a blur of transformation. While Amelia finished the final, painstaking stitches on the lost Orpheus, she spent her evenings on a different kind of education. Julian's team, led by the ever-efficient Mr. Graves, began her onboarding. She was assigned a team of lawyers to finalize the foundation's charter, a finance team to explain the management of a $500 million endowment, and a personal branding consultant. "We must reintroduce you to the world, Miss Hayes," the consultant, a chic woman named Sophia, explained. "You are no longer a backroom restorer. You are the CEO and director of a major global foundation." Amelia's grey cardigans were replaced with tailored blazers, silk blouses, and elegant, custom-made dresses. Her mousy brown hair was cut and styled into a sophisticated, confident bob. She learned about board meetings, about philanthropic strategy, about public speaking. The most surprising part was how natural it felt. It was just a different kind of restoration project. This time, the subject was herself. She was not just a restorer, she was an executive. She had a mind for logistics, a clear vision, and, as Julian happily pointed out, zero tolerance for bureaucratic nonsense. "You've been managing complex, irreplaceable projects with no budget and no support for a decade, Amelia," he told her. "This is the same job, just with an unlimited budget and all the support you need. You're a natural." As her new life was being woven, Mark Riley's was beginning to unravel. Life with Chloe was not the glamorous dream he had envisioned. It was an endless, exhausting, and astronomically expensive performance. Chloe needed the best tables. She needed new outfits for every event. She needed to be seen in the right places, with the right people. And the right people were all somehow connected to Julian Thorne. The upcoming New York Preservation Ball was the event of the season. The guest of honor? The reclusive Julian Thorne himself, who was rumored to be making his first public appearance in a decade to announce a major philanthropic venture. For Mark and Chloe, being at that ball, and getting even a moment of Thorne's time, was everything. It was Mark's one chance to leapfrog from Barrington Capital to the big leagues. "Mark, darling," Chloe said one evening, scrolling through her phone as Mark nervously checked his bank account. The $20,000 tickets for the ball had nearly maxed out his credit. "The Thorns are unveiling some new project. Everyone is going to be there. I need the new Dior gown, the silver one." "Chloe, that's got to be $15,000, Mark stammered. Chloe looked up, her blue eyes turning to ice. "And? Do you want to look like you belong, or do you want to look like, well, like her?" Her, Amelia. He hadn't thought about her in months. He'd seen she'd moved out and felt a brief, passing flicker of nothing. Relief, mostly. He'd made the right call. He was on his way up. "Of course, honey. The gown. Whatever you need," he said, the words tasting like ash. He was in debt, deeply in debt. But he was with a Vanderbilt. It was the cost of doing business. He'd been trying for months to get a meeting with anyone at Thorn Enterprises. He sent emails. He cold called. He tried to network his way through LinkedIn. All he got was silence. He had no idea that the Ms. A. Hayes director's office, who was auto-rejecting his meeting requests, was the same woman he'd called a low-yield asset. Amelia, sorting through her new business correspondence, saw his name pop up in her inbox. "Request for a meeting. Synergies with Barrington Capital." She smiled, a small, tight smile. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel sadness. She felt pity. He was still playing his small, sad game. She typed a single word. Decline. The night of the New York Preservation Ball arrived. The venue, the grand atrium of the New York Public Library, was a sea of black tie, diamonds, and ambition. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the sound of nervous, high-pitched laughter. Mark Riley stood by a massive marble pillar, tugging at his starched collar. The tuxedo was a rental, and it chafed. Chloe, beside him, was a vision in her $15,000 silver Dior gown, her phone held high as she took endless selfies. "Look, Mark," she hissed, nudging him. "That's Robert Mercer from the J.P. Morgan Trust, and over there, the entire board of the Met. We must be seen with them." Mark's eyes scanned the room, not for art, but for targets. He was sweating. This one night had cost him more than he earned in 3 months. He had to make it count. He had to get to Julian Thorn. "He's not here yet," Mark muttered, checking his watch. "They said he's making his entrance at 9. "Well, let's mingle," Chloe said, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward a group of people she recognized from Instagram. Mark plastered on his networking smile. For an hour, he endured conversations about auras, crypto, and the horrors of flying commercial. Chloe lapped it up, laughing her high, tinkling laugh at jokes that weren't funny. Mark felt a sudden, strange emptiness. It was also fake. Every person in the room was selling something. He'd wanted this world so badly, and now that he was on the fringes of it, he just felt cheap. At exactly 9 p.m., the lights in the atrium dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. The director of the Preservation Society, an elegant older woman, stepped up to the podium. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice echoing in the vast space. "We are so thrilled to have you here to celebrate the future of preservation. Tonight, we are honored to announce a new, transformative partnership. A new institution that will, without a doubt, change the world of art conservation forever." Mark and Chloe shuffled closer to the stage. This was it. This new venture is the vision of one man. A man whose passion for history is as deep as his brilliance in technology. It is my profound honor to introduce, for the first time in 10 years, Mr. Julian Thorn. A spotlight hit the entrance. The crowd erupted in applause. Julian Thorn walked onto the stage, looking uncomfortable but distinguished in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He waved once, shyly, and walked to the podium. "Thank you," he said, his quiet voice silencing the room instantly. "Thank you. I'm not a man for speeches. I prefer to let the work speak for itself. For centuries, we have watched our most beautiful, fragile heritage disintegrate. We've treated the arts of the needle and the loom as women's work, as hobbies. We were wrong." Mark felt a strange, cold prickle on the back of his neck. "Tonight," Julian continued, "we are unveiling the first masterpiece, restored by the New Thorn Institute for Textile Preservation, a piece lost for 200 years, the Lost Orpheus." On the stage behind him, a massive velvet curtain drew back. The crowd gasped. There, lit in a soft, brilliant light, was the tapestry. It was breathtaking. The colors were vibrant, the gold thread gleaming. The massive tear at its center was gone. It was not just restored, it was alive. Mark stared at it, impressed. Chloe was already taking a picture. "But this masterpiece," Julian said, his voice ringing with a new pride, "is nothing compared to the master who saved it. The work you see is the result of 6 months of genius, of passion, of a dedication I have never witnessed. To run this new $500 million foundation, I needed a visionary. I needed its new CEO and director. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Amelia Hayes." The name hung in the air. Amelia Hayes. Mark Riley's blood turned to ice water. His smile froze, cracking on his face. "What?" he whispered. "What did he say?" Chloe's head snapped toward him. "What did he call her? Amelia, who?" A second spotlight hit the main entrance, and into the light she walked. It was Amelia. But it wasn't his Amelia. The mousy woman in the grey cardigan was gone. In her place was a woman who commanded the room. She was wearing a simple, elegant gown of deep emerald green silk that shimmered under the lights. Her hair was styled in a way that highlighted her intelligent eyes, and she wore a simple, stunning diamond necklace. She wasn't beautiful in the way Chloe was beautiful, all sharp angles and polish. Amelia was radiant. She glowed with a quiet, unshakable confidence. She walked directly to the stage, the entire room of billionaires and socialites parting for her, as if she were royalty. She shook the director's hand and then stood beside Julian Thorne, who looked at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated admiration. Mark couldn't breathe. His hands were shaking. No, it's not possible." "My God," Chloe whispered, her face pale with shock and a dawning venomous envy. "That's her. That's your little mouse." On stage, Amelia stepped to the microphone. "Thank you, Julian," she said. Her voice was clear, strong, and carried through the entire hall. There was no trace of the quiet, hesitant woman he knew. "This tapestry," she said, gesturing to the Orpheus, "is a story. It's not just a picture of a myth. It's a story of creation, of loss and of resurrection. It was torn apart, forgotten, and left in the dark. But it was never worthless. It was just waiting for someone to see its value, to read its story, and to have the patience to weave it back together." She looked out over the crowd, her gaze sweeping the room. Her eyes met Mark's. He was standing there, frozen, his rented tuxedo feeling like a clown suit. He saw her eyes lock on his. He saw the flicker of recognition. And then, nothing. She didn't glare, she didn't smirk. She just looked through him. It was a polite, dismissive non-event. He was a speck of dust on the floor. He was a low-yield asset. He was nothing. She turned her gaze back to the front row. "The Thorn Institute is built on that simple idea," Amelia continued. "That true value is often quiet. It's in the things we discard, the skills we forget, and the people we underestimate. Our mission is not just to save art, but to find the passion in the overlooked. Thank you." The room exploded in applause. It was thunderous. Julian Thorne stepped forward, and, in a gesture that stunned the entire room, he took Amelia's hand. But he didn't just shake it. He raised it to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "The CIO, director, and visionary," Julian announced into the microphone. "Amelia Hayes." It was at that moment that Mark Riley's entire world collapsed, the ladder he was climbing so desperately. Amelia was at the top of it. No, she owned the building the ladder was leaning against. The men he was desperate to impress were now lining up to shake her hand. He felt a hand on his arm. It was Chloe. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "You!" she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You absolute idiot!" "Chloe, wait, I didn't know." "You dumped her?" Chloe's eyes were wide with a kind of horrified awe. "The CEO of the Thorne Foundation? You dumped her? For me? You told me she was the nobody? You told me I was the upgrade?" She laughed, a high, brittle sound that was closer to a scream. "You're a fool, Mark. You're not a shark. You're bait, and you're attached to a sinking ship." She let go of his arm, smoothed the front of her silver dress, and, with her head held high, turned and walked away from him. She headed straight for the stage, a brilliant, predatory smile aimed squarely at Julian Thorne. Mark was left alone, standing by the pillar in the center of a room that was now celebrating the woman he had thrown away. Every person he had tried to impress was now looking at her. He saw Robert Mercer from J.P. Morgan clasp her hand warmly. He saw the board of the Met inviting her to a private dinner. He had traded a diamond for a piece of glass. He had thrown away a masterpiece because he was too stupid to see its value. He'd wanted a better woman, and he'd been standing right next to the best one, too blind and arrogant to realize it. The crowd began to move toward the tapestry for a closer look, flowing around Mark as if he were a rock in a river. He was invisible. He had reallocated his portfolio, and he had gone bankrupt. Amelia, across the room, accepted a glass of champagne from Julian. She laughed at something he said, her face bright with genuine joy. She had her new life, her passion, and her purpose. She had been resurrected, and she never once looked back. The applause was a physical wave, washing over Amelia in a warm, bright tide. As she stepped down from the stage, Julian's hand was there, steadying her elbow. It wasn't a gesture of possession, but of support. "You were magnificent," he murmured, his eyes fixed on her, the roar of the crowd fading to a background hum. "You commanded them." "I just told the truth," she said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. In an instant, they were surrounded. The sharks were circling, but now they weren't circling Mark, they were swimming toward Amelia. "Ms. Hayes, a breathtaking speech." Robert Mercer, the man Mark had pointed out earlier, was in front of her, his hand extended. "Robert Mercer, J.P. Morgan Trust. The work on that tapestry is a miracle. We must discuss your conservation strategies. My wife's family has a collection of Flemish tapestries that are, frankly, a disgrace. Ms. Hayes, a moment." A woman with the sharp, intelligent face of a New York Times critic was at her other side. "Can you speak to the chemical composition of the new dyes?" Amelia, the woman who weeks ago was applying for barista jobs, was now the center of the most powerful room in New York. She handled it with an innate grace, the years of quiet, meticulous focus translating perfectly into this new world. She was no longer a restorer, she was a director. She was an authority. From across the room, Mark watched. He was a ghost. People jostled past him, their backs brushing his rented tuxedo, their eyes locked on the glowing new star in their firmament. He was utterly, completely invisible. Then he saw a flash of silver. Chloe. She had recovered from her initial shock, and her social instincts had taken over. If Mark was a sinking ship, she was a rat, and she was leaping. She was pushing her way through the crowd, her smile bright and brittle, aimed not at Julian, but at Amelia. "Amelia, darling," Chloe gushed, appearing in front of her. She completely ignored Mark's existence. "That was just stunning. I mean, truly. I had no idea you had such a cute little talent. That tapestry is just divine." Amelia's smile didn't falter, but her eyes became cool. "Thank you for your interest, Miss Vanderbilt." Chloe laughed, that high, tinkling sound. "Oh, Miss Vanderbilt. So formal. We're practically family. Listen." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I am so glad you're okay. Mark was just, well, you know. He became such a project. It was exhausting. You and I were better off, aren't we? Survivors." She was trying to build an alliance, a we women front against the man she had just discarded. Amelia looked at her, the polite smile fixed. "The Institute will be launching a public donations portal next week," she said, her voice clear and professional, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "We'd be grateful for your support." Chloe's face froze. Amelia had just, in the most polite way possible, classified her as a common donor, a nobody with a checkbook. She hadn't accepted the alliance. She hadn't acknowledged their shared past. She had simply, and devastatingly, put Chloe in her place. The critic from the Times stifled a snort. Robert Mercer's lip twitched. Chloe, for the first time that night, flushed a deep, ugly red. She had been dismissed. By the mouse. "Of course," Chloe stammered, then turned and vanished into the crowd. Amelia turned back to Mr. Mercer. "Now, about those Flemish pieces." Julian Thorne watched the entire exchange, and the slow, genuine smile that he reserved only for Amelia returned. He had chosen perfectly. Mark didn't wait for the event to end. He couldn't. He felt as if the air was being squeezed from his lungs. He walked out of the grand atrium, past the valets and the line of waiting town cars, and onto the cold street. He kept walking until his feet ached, the sound of the applause for Amelia Hayes echoing in his ears. The next morning, Mark woke up on the lumpy sofa of his old college friend, the only person who had answered his drunken 2 a.m. call. His head was pounding. His phone, when he finally dared to look at it, was a minefield. Dozens of texts. Most were from Chloe, a stream of escalating venom. "You are a joke. My Dior gown is on your credit card. Pay it. You ruined me. Everyone was laughing. Don't you ever contact me again. I've already had the locks changed." But the one that made his blood run cold was a single, simple calendar invite from his boss at Barrington Capital. Subject, urgent review, 9:00 a.m., my office. T. Henderson. Mark arrived at the office, his rented tux stuffed in a garbage bag, his suit rumpled. He felt like a pariah. The receptionist wouldn't meet his eye. He walked into Tom Henderson's glass-walled office. Henderson was a shark in a $5,000 suit, and he was not smiling. He was holding a copy of the New York Times, open to the society section. There was a large, full-color photo of Amelia and Julian Thorne on the stage. "Riley, sit down," Henderson said, his voice clipped. Mark sat. "I was at the ball last night," Henderson said. He tapped the newspaper. "Impressive, truly. Julian Thorne, back from the dead, and a $500 million endowment. That's real money." "Yes, sir. It's incredible," Mark stammered. "What's incredible, Mark? is your judgment, your catastrophically bad judgment." Mark's stomach dropped. "Sir, for 6 months, you've been the hotshot associate, the guy who was trading up. You've been dating Chloe Vanderbilt, bragging about it. You know what I learned last night? The Vanderbilts are leveraged to the hankles. Her father's estate is a house of cards. She's not an asset, Mark. She's Instagram debt. She's a liability." I didn't know." "No, you didn't, because you were too busy looking at the paint job to check the engine. But that's not even the worst of it." Henderson stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "The worst of it, Riley, is the woman in this picture. Ms. Amelia Hayes, the new CEO of the Thorne Foundation. A woman who now has Robert Mercer on speed dial. A woman who, I'm told by mutual acquaintances, was your girlfriend for 5 years." Mark's mouth went dry. "You were living with her," Henderson said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You had a 5-year relationship with the person Julian Thorne hand-picked to run his entire legacy. And what was the story I heard? You dumped her for an upgrade. You called her, and I quote, a dead end. Is that true?" It was a personal matter, sir. It was complicated." "Personal?" Henderson laughed, a sharp, cold sound. "Nothing is personal when it's this public. You had a direct line to the most exclusive venture in this city, and you threw it away because you thought she was quaint. You didn't just fail to see the value, Riley. You insulted it. You publicly humiliated a woman who is now, for all intents and purposes, one of the most powerful people in our world. You've made an enemy of Julian Thorne's right hand." "I can fix it. I can talk to her," Mark said, desperation making his voice high. "You are a fool," Henderson said, sitting back down. "This firm is about one thing, relationships, and you have proven you are incapable of valuing the right ones. You're a liability, Mark. You've got terrible optics. You're a low-yield asset. We're reallocating your portfolio." Mark recognized his own words. They were being turned on him like a knife. "As of this moment," Henderson said, pressing a button on his intercom, "your employment at Barrington Capital is terminated. Security will escort you out." 6 weeks later. The first snow of the season was falling, dusting the scaffolding that now shrouded a beautiful limestone facade building in the West Village. This was the future home of the Thorne Institute. Amelia Hayes, in a stylish wool coat and hard hat, was directing the construction foreman. "No," she was saying firmly, pointing at a blueprint. "The east wall needs full-spectrum UV filtration, not just tempered glass. The light is too direct. It will damage the 18th century silks. Please have the architect redo the specifications." "Yes, Ms. Hayes, right away." She was a natural leader, decisive, clear, and respected. As she turned to leave, a figure stepped out from behind a stack of drywall. "Amelia?" She stopped. She knew that voice. She turned, her expression carefully neutral. It was Mark. He was a shadow of the man he'd been. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed desperation. His suit was cheap and ill-fitting. He hadn't shaved in days. "Mark?" she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an acknowledgement of an object in her path. "Amelia, my God, look at you," he stammered, gesturing at the building, at her. "This is... wow, just wow. I came to apologize." "That's not necessary," she said, checking her watch. "I have a meeting." "No, please, just hear me out." He stepped closer, his hands twisting. "I was an idiot, a complete, total fool. I was blinded by all that fake, shiny stuff. Chloe, it was all a lie. I see that now. What we had, Amelia, that was real." Amelia said nothing. She just looked at him, her gaze clear and patient, as if waiting for a slow-moving train to pass. "I lost everything," he whispered, the fake confidence crumbling. "I lost my job. I'm ruined. Chloe cleaned me out. I'm sleeping on my friend's sofa. The one I bought with you at the flea market." He looked at her, his eyes pleading. "I'm not asking you to take me back. I need help. A job. Anything. A project manager. I'm good with finance. You know that? I could help you with the endowment. For old time's sake." He was trying to leverage their shared past, the very past he had incinerated. He was asking to be her project again. Amelia finally spoke. Her voice was not cold. It wasn't angry. It was something far more devastating. It was polite. "Mr. Riley," she said. The name hit him like a physical slap. "Mr. Riley, I appreciate your interest in the Thorne Institute," she continued, her tone the smooth, professional cadence of a CEO. "It's an exciting venture. We've been inundated with applications. Amelia, please, it's me. If you'd like to be considered for a position," she said, pulling a business card from her coat, "you can submit your resume to the email address for our Human Resources Department. They handle all the initial screening. I'm sure if your qualifications are a match, they'll be in touch to schedule an interview." She held the card out to him. He stared at it, his hand trembling. This was it. The final door shutting in his face. She wasn't going to save him. She wasn't going to rage or cry or give him the satisfaction of revenge. She was just dismissing him, like a stranger, an unqualified applicant. He numbly took the card. "I see," he whispered. "Good luck with your search, Mark," she said, using his first name as a final, tiny gesture of pity. She turned and walked away. A sleek, black town car, a private car, not a ride-share, pulled up to the curb exactly as she reached it. The back door opened. Julian Thorne was sitting inside, holding a coffee cup out for her. "How's the east wall?" he asked. "Handled," Amelia said, sliding in beside him. She didn't look back. Mark Riley stood alone on the snowy sidewalk, holding a business card for a job he would never get. He watched the car pull away, carrying the masterpiece he had been too blind to see, and the billionaire who had known her value all along. Mark learned the hard way that the better woman isn't the one with the loudest voice or the shiniest life. It's the one with quiet strength, hidden value, and a passion that can't be bought. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that self-worth isn't determined by someone else's opinion. While Mark and Chloe are left dealing with the social and financial fallout of their own shallow choices, Amelia is just getting started, building a global empire founded on the very hobby he mocked. What did you think of Mark's epic miscalculation? Do you think Chloe got what she deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and transformation, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories every week.